Hello, everyone. People are still joining, so we'll kind of talk slowly to get started as people join in. So, welcome to Marketing Your Nonprofit While Social Distancing.
Hey guys, Heather Loveridge here. I am the Chief Storyteller for the Community Foundation for Northeast Georgia. And I have the privilege of telling the Community Foundation's story in a variety of ways that help connect people who care with causes that matter. I'm also the founder of Magnolia Media Group, a marketing firm that's focused on helping nonprofits tell their story well. Amanda?
Yeah, and I'm Amanda Sutt. I am the CEO and creative director at Rock, Paper, Scissors, and we are a branding and marketing firm that's focused on helping our clients cut through the clutter and partner with them to build brands that connect and messages that resonate to drive results. We've been in business for over 30 years, so we've seen a lot of changes. We've seen a lot of change in the last 3 weeks
Right.
and done a lot of changing ourselves to keep up with the time. And we have been helping the Community Foundation with their branding. So we've been
Mhm.
partnering with Heather for many years at this
That's
point.
right. Doing a great job.
All right, I want to remind everybody that this is not just a presentation, this is a conversation. So feel free to post your comments and questions in the chat box. We will definitely have a chance at the end to go through specific ones. We will try and keep up with it as we go along and what is important. So, and if you're listening to this broadcast after the live piece, please post comments in the YouTube chat and we will make sure that we follow up with those as well. So for today, just give a summary of what we're going to cover is we are going to start with crisis marketing, and we're going to start with some things that don't change and that would stay the same. So we want to start there. Then we'll talk about what has changed. We'll talk about how to adjust goals, also how to adjust your funnel and marketing channels, as well as communicating during a crisis, the show and tell and thank method, be social, and then we'll talk about some next steps with this as well. So I want to kick off with this really great quote because I think it's important to give some context for what we're looking at. So when it comes to crisis communication, if you always focus on building relationships with your customers, fans, and followers, you will always find yourself communicating in the right direction. So as you hear Heather and I talk today, it is all about continuing to build relationships and avoid that shooting from the hip and being very intentional about what we do. So to kick that off, we want to start with some things that stay the same. So when you're marketing during time of crisis, like the one our world is experiencing now, there are a few things that will stay the same. So don't throw all your marketing best practices out with the bathwater. I want to start with what needs to stay steadfast. So first up, you still need a plan before anything else. And I love this metaphor because you wouldn't build a house without a plan. So why would you do marketing without a plan? Because if you don't have a plan, let's stick with that house metaphor, you start throwing up walls in the middle of a room, maybe block off something that was really important, or you don't have the connector that you need to really make something happen. So I know it's a lot harder right now to take a breath and really focus on doing a plan, but it really is so critical because we want to make sure that you're doing things today that you will be proud of in 3 months, 4 months from now, and that will really help your organization continue to grow. So with that being said, it's even more important when we're looking at this of not being reactionary and really being intentional. Because when you're a reactionary, you see all the things that are in your way. But when you take that time to be intentional, all of a sudden you can see the spaces where you can cleanly move through. And once again, we want to focus on how are you building really good relationships through this process. Another thing that doesn't change is your audience. They are still your audience. Some of their perceptions might change, and Heather will hit on this in a little bit, but you're still serving the same group of people. Your donors are there. They might not be able to give as much right now, but they haven't gone away. Your consumer, who you're delivering your service to, they are still there and maybe in more need. So don't forget who they are and don't get distracted and pull away from the audience you had 4 weeks ago before we all started going and hiding in our own homes. And then the stories you tell, those are also really important as well. Don't forget to be a storyteller. And Heather's going to hit a whole bunch on that in just a minute. So now some things are actually different. So now that we've covered what what need to hold the same. Let's pivot into things that are different during this time. And so that we want to keep in mind and think outside the box in new ways to tell your story, because you want to make sure that you don't come across as uh, un, uncaring, because that's really where you start to build some disconnect. So once again, focus, focus, focus on that relationship. So some of your marketing channels may shift during this period. You might not be able to convert in certain ways the way that they've done before, especially if one of your marketing channels was people walking past your building or coming in to get service. That is a channel that has shifted. So just be mindful if there's anything that was directed that way, and what can you do instead of that.
And also, don't forget which that your resources are different during this time too. Money may be an issue. Your budget may have shrunk. You may have, working on some donor retention to try to help with that, or getting to funds different ways. So, realize that may change how you think about your plan right now. Um, Also realize technology. I mean, thank goodness we live in the time that we do live in, and we've got access to as many different kinds of technology as we have. But it's also a challenge. You might be working from home. You don't have access to everything that you had in the office. Your staff is scattered. So think through that too. And then think about, this is a big one because I think we're all feeling it right now, but your manpower and your bandwidth. Everybody's under a new and different kind of load, a mental, emotional load, many times more than physical. And so that has definitely changed. If you normally work with a big group of volunteers, like I know a lot of our co-ops, especially if you've got older volunteers, many of them don't want to come, understandably, to help volunteer. So just think through that too. If you've got somebody who used to do social for you and they're not there, how do you work around that? Your team members who are not only working from home, but they've got kids and they're trying to help them with school. And they've also maybe got a spouse that's home working with them. So all kinds of different resources that have changed during this time as well. And then also realize your pain points may change. So those things that resonated with your audience before all this happened, they may have changed as well. And so you have to shift the way you're telling your story, the way your organization handles your messaging, and shift those priorities to meet the needs of your community. If you're meeting physical needs, if it's, healthcare, or going back to our food co-ops again, those pain points have changed. Now people are in a crisis mode. They're not just thinking, I need some food to get me through the next 2 weeks. They're thinking, I need food to get me through the next couple of days. And then think through about other pain points too. If you're dealing with your housing people, what are they struggling with at this point? If you're thinking about your donors, so loss of jobs and income, the childcare, many kids are at home. Almost all kids should be at
Yes.
home unless they're somewhere else. um, they may not have the funds that they had to give to causes they care about. They're maybe struggling with work-life balance. They may have struggle with the social distancing and the effect that's having on their extracurricular activities. So all those pain points are new and different in this situation.
So knowing all of that, it's really important that the first thing you really need to do is you need to start in by adjusting your goals. So knowing that what was true a month ago isn't true anymore. And I want to go back to don't throw them all away, but start with any goals you had at the beginning of the year and see what is still feasible and not feasible. A great exercise at this point, if you can bring together any leadership or board members, is just do a simple SWOT analysis. That's a great way to get everybody in to start some open discussions, because right now, even though the world has changed, there are way more opportunities for us to think creatively, and the world is open to so many new things. It's just about who can get it out there and communicate it as clearly as possible. So start with that. Start with what that goal shift looks like. And there's two things you really need to take into consideration now. It's so easy for us to focus on the trees right now and forget about the forest because of what we need to help, to help your community with. Help, what do they need today, tomorrow, as opposed to when we actually all get to come back together. So that is one of your challenges in both marketing and leading through this, is you need to hold both of those ideas. You need to hold what is going to really help your audience in the next couple days, couple weeks to get them through us all coming back together in the same room. But you also need to hold on to, okay, what is this going to be for the organization 6 months from now, a year from now? So that needs to be factored into it. So that's why SWOT analysis is always really good, because it helps you think about both sides of those pieces. And you need to be making adjustments per both of those ideas. And you might even want to have two sets of goals when you're doing this. So when we're talking about short-term goals, it's all about pivoting and thinking smarter about this. I'm going to walk you guys through a smarter goal exercise to help you really kind of, how do you write better goals? Because you have to pivot at this point. You need to look at whatever your planning was at the beginning of the year and say, what is on hold, what still is true, and then what needs to pivot. And so what needs to pivot, we want to run through what we like to call the smarter goal checklist. And we're going to have a download available for quite a few pieces in here today. So you'll see that little icon on the slide. We'll send an announcement out or an email out afterwards that you guys can go in and get all these resources. So if you're going to have to come up with new goals or have to pivot goals, this is a better way to be able to help be very clear about your goals. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that SMART acronym. Well, Michael Hyatt has come out with one that's smarter, and it's really made a big difference on getting better goals and clarification. So I just want to walk through it to help you guys understand what that means. So our S is specific, and it needs to be specific enough to focus on the direct energies for what you're doing. The M is measurable, so you can keep track of your progress. Actionable, with clear initiating verb that prompts specific activity. And kind of just to go with this, anytime you're writing a goal, I don't think I always have a verb to start the goal. And that really makes sure that you have that. And it's a very clear goal, not usually just like grow my audience, but like be specific and measurable about what that growth looks like. The first R is risky. So it needs to be risky enough to leverage our natural tendency to rise to the challenge. If it's not big enough, we're just going to put it off and put it off. I'll get to it later. Oh, that's not a big deal. So it really needs to get you excited about it. T is for time keyed. So you're prompted exactly when to act. So if you're pivoting or writing new goals, it could be specifically for the shelter in place timeline, or it could be this will start after shelter in place is lifted. So those are some really key things to be thinking about there. E is exciting. It has to be exciting enough to inspire and harness the power of your intrinsic motivation. Too often we write goals because we think we should, and then we never get to it because we weren't inspired to do so. So that's a really good one, especially if you have the opportunity to collaborate with your board or even leadership or team members. What is going to get everybody on the team to buy into this? And that's something that's not talked about with goals very often. And I think this right here is the piece that has changed the way goal setting, of doing something that really steps it up. And the last R is relevant, and that's relevant with the overall context of your life. So this changed completely when we all started to shelter in place, because there are some things that just aren't relevant anymore. We cannot gather in big groups at this time. So how does that change? How do you still bring people together? So thinking about what that's changed, but relevant also for this stage of your business as well, or your nonprofit. Are you a young nonprofit, so it's more hands-on? Are you more mature, that you can leverage some of that experience? So just take that into consideration, because if you are a smaller nonprofit and you're looking at some bigger nonprofits for inspiration, what they're doing might not be relevant for your stage of your business life. So really look at that. Make sure you're comparing apples to apples if you're looking for inspiration. Or if you're dreaming big, make sure you scale it back into something that is actually realistic as well. All right. So once you've adjusted your goals, then you can start changing your funnel and your marketing channels so that you're not wasting assets. And that's a big part of this. If you start changing your tactics without adjusting your goals, that is when most of your assets get wasted. And that's why I want to be right now, we talk about resources being limited, and that could be you don't have as many volunteers, you don't have as many as much cash coming in. So you want to be very, and I like to use this word, intentional. So it really helps with your intentionality if you've done that first step of just adjust your goals. I want to take 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes, to talk about the funnel. If you guys have heard me present before, you know I bring this up a lot. So if you haven't heard it, I want to make sure anybody who hasn't heard this before gets to hear it, because I think it's really important to understand what every person who is making a decision with your organization is going through. This is your donors, this is your service receivers, this is volunteers. Every human goes through this process when they make a decision. And so it's really important to understand what that's like so that you can make messages that are relevant to that part of the decision process each person is in. Now, side note, because of this crisis right now, people are going through this process much faster. They are being forced to, but we do not skip steps when we do this. So the first step is awareness. And this is just knowing that that service is available. There might be people out there who are in desperate need of your services who have never had to ask you for it before. So they're just people just looking to even know that you're around. So there's, once again, opportunity there. But this is, they don't even know that you have it or that you exist. So that's just kind of basic, like just understanding, hi, my name is kind of a situation. Once they get past awareness, then they get into the interest of, oh, okay, this might be something I need. Let me find out a little bit more information to see if it's relevant for my stage of whatever position they're in. And so that's when they start doing some basic research. Then they go to that decision making. And when they hit decision making, they've said, yes, this is something I definitely need. And then they're starting to compare you to could be other nonprofits, other services, a lot of different things. But this is when they're starting to figure out apples to apples, apples to oranges, whatever that looks like. And then the final step is action, when they're actually following through with it. You'll notice on the left-hand side that I have marketing and sales indicated. And it's important to see that because the first 3 stages are marketing now. And if we would have been talking about this even 10 years ago, that proportion would have been flipped. More people were picking up the phone to call you to find out things. They're not doing that now. They're looking on your social media. They're looking on their website. They're getting word of mouth referrals. They're looking at reviews, any of that stuff. So they're not talking to you or a volunteer or anybody in your organization until they're actually ready to decide. So that really starts to change how you're telling your story. You're having to cover 3 different pieces of that decision process without actually getting to hear from that consumer. And I use consumer broadly because that could be information, that could be product, that could be services, but that's what they're having to go through. So it's just good for you to start understanding what that process is and making sure that you have content that hits on each one of these stories. So if you're doing a ton of social media, you need to make sure that every once in a while you have a reintroduction for people who are coming in there, or making sure that your about content is up to date and has your actual services, your hours are up to date, if you're closed, having that done. So just be aware that people are coming in at each one of those phases. All right, I'll get off my funnel soapbox. When we're talking about marketing strategy, there's typically 2 goals that we can filter everything into. It's either you're trying to convert your audience, and that could be donors or getting volunteers to come or people to use your services, or you're trying to grow that audience. So that growing that audience is, they're not necessarily ready to convert, but you're starting to have more people follow you. Right now, depending on what pool we're talking about, you might not be able to convert parts of your audience. You might not be able to have volunteers come in. You might not be able to have donors donating at the rate that they were. You're having to get more creative about this. So if that, for some reason, whatever your circumstances are, you can't focus on converting your audience, then you need to be always focusing on growing your audience, because there are more people listening, and Heather will get into some stats on what's happening on social media and how people are pivoting digitally. You want to make sure that you're growing that so that you're ready, because we will go back to work. We will go see each other again. Just want to say that so you remember that. So this is another download I'm going to throw in for you guys as you're doing and looking through your goal setting is marketing channels. Okay, so this is a download that you guys can look through and go, okay, what marketing channels do we have? Has anything opened up for us? Is there anything that you can't use anymore? Just to kind of give you a springboard. this is by no means comprehensive, but it's a good place to be able to brainstorm and really start to open up what are those ideas again. So we'll put that in the follow-up materials so that you guys have that to really think about, okay, this is your tactics of how you're going to start communicating with people, and how do those start to change.
And I love that Amanda talked about having a plan, because for some of you, you've got the bandwidth now to really sit down and think through, okay, what do we need to be messaging right now? Like Amanda said, what do we need to be messaging throughout, the rest of the year after this stops when we move into recovery mode. For some of you, it's boots on the ground, but you still need to make some time, even if it's a sketch of some kind of a plan. You may not have the
30
time.
minutes would be great.
Yes, even 30 minutes, but just some structured thinking just to set aside and plan and strategize. So I love that we covered that. And so I want to give you guys 3 things to remember when communicating during a crisis, because sometimes we tend to forget about this or just assume that everybody knows what we're doing and what's happening, but you also have to realize people are flooded with information right now as well. So 3 things to remember: show and tell, then think. And I'm going back to 3rd grade when you brought your teddy bear or doll or GI Joe or whatever it was, and did show and tell. And if you remember, then you had your object that you brought to class with you, and then you also told about it. That's what you have to be doing right now when you're communicating. Don't assume that people just automatically are looking for you or know what you're doing, or know that you might be offering different services or adjusted services, or your hours might be different, like Amanda said. So make sure that you're still covering. We're going to go into those a little bit more deeply. And then talking, I'm going in a little bit out of order, but this is important too. So remember that messaging matters, and you still have to tell your story well. And the hero's journey still applies as well. If you're not familiar with the hero's journey, it comes from Donald Miller's Story Brand, which is a great book, great podcast, website, all the different things. And so if you haven't checked that out yet, and if you've got time, that's a great book to add to your reading list. And he starts out with, there's a character. Every story has a character who wants something. You think about that in the movies. There's the hero, if it's a superhero. And within minutes, the audience knows what they want. But most companies aren't clear in explaining, what they offer, even a lot of nonprofits. So when you define something your customer wants, you invite them into a very specific story. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for you to invite them into a story. And so as Donald says in his book, is the short version is you have to summarize what you offer in just a few words, because if you throw out multiple solutions, you'll be ignored, especially right now when we're just inundated on just from every side. Our brain isn't made to process that many storylines, let alone just the crisis that we're in right now. We're kind of in that flight or fight mode is what I think. So think about this. What do my customers want as it relates to my brand, aka my nonprofit? Are we known for one thing that it offers? So again, going back to basics during this time as well. And we've got a great example of the Story Brand, the hero journey from Story Brand. So as you're thinking about telling your nonprofit's story well during this current crisis, remember that hero's journey. So there is a character who has a problem. So I'm going to pick on food banks, because that in the community foundation world, that's just all that we've been in, it seems like, the past couple of weeks, especially this week with spring break and everybody just getting inundated. So you've got that character, someone who's coming for food. The problem is they don't have food. So they come to someone, they meet a guide who understands their fear. That's you. You give them a plan. That's, well, here's some food, and here's when you can get it. Here's when you can get it next. And so that calls them to action to show up and get that food. And that results in, in this case, in joy, because they've been able to meet the needs for themselves, or if they have a family or whatever. So look for those stories. And I'm going to touch on one that I found that I thought was a good example. But look for those stories throughout this time. So remember, you need a person with a problem, and you need to be the guide who helps solve that problem for them. And that sums up the hero's journey. And determine your new story, because like we've discovered, everybody's discovered at this point, what you had planned in January, a lot of times you've just thrown out the window because it's just not relevant right now. So what is that new story that you need to tell not next week a lot of times, but right now, like today, tomorrow, this weekend. Is it the fact that you are, maybe you're not able to do what you used to do because maybe you're doing home repairs inside a house, and so you can't do that right now. What else are you doing instead? Or maybe you were serving senior population in a certain way and you can't do that now because they are now homebound. So figure out that new story that you need to tell. Make it something relevant, that's going to resonate not only with your audience of your clients, but also your donors, because as we all know, everybody especially needs funding during this time. And I've got some things to remember too, because we can easily get lost in the trees, lost in the weeds, as Amanda said. So when you're thinking about messaging during a crisis, we talked about storytelling. Make sure you still have the basics of what makes a great story. What does that new story look like during this time? But then I also want to encourage you to think bigger picture across all your messaging, your marketing, your communications during this time. Because again, what you did before, it does not work right now. So remember, be empathetic. Everybody is struggling. Even if they look like they've got it together internally, they're probably screaming. So everybody's struggling. So be empathetic to even what you may not be able to understand, but just realize that they may be going through something that you can't even see or hear. Be vulnerable. So communicate. If you're a nonprofit working, whether it's your executive director, and you are just not sure what your next steps are sometimes, or how you're going to get enough food, communicate that. Let people know that, hey, I'm just not sure, and so I need your help during this time. So don't act as if you've got it all together, because right now most of us don't. So be vulnerable, but also be hopeful. This is, as Amanda said, this is not going to last forever. Any crisis does not last for forever. So remember to provide hope too. We've got enough doom and gloom. So your messaging also needs to say, okay, we understand during this time that it is rough, but we're hopeful. Here's the good that we're seeing that's happening. Here's what we're anticipating for the future. And then be consistent. Don't send out messaging, once in a week and then skip 2 weeks, or just say something about something once and then never bring it up again. As much clutter as we have going on right now, you need to be consistent in getting your message out there so that people have more opportunity to see it, and also know that, you are not changing course in the middle of something, that you are just consistent with what you're doing and saying and providing. And then be clear and relevant. So now is not the time to wax eloquent and provide, a tome on your services. It is time to say we provide food, or we provide healthcare, or we're, sheltering kids and helping make sure they're still learning during this time, and just be relevant. And again, that kind of goes back to understanding the situation and making sure that you're speaking into what is happening right now during this time. And I want to give you guys an example, talking about show and tell. So if you know how to tell your story well, the framework for a great story, you're looking for those good stories, make sure you show it as well. And I pulled this one. Margie sent this out, I think on Tuesday of this week, in an e-newsletter, but she did a really good job. And I know they're all exhausted over there too, but just showing, here's the struggle that we're having right now. We've got just hundreds of people coming through to get food. And so she explained that in the newsletter. And then I'm going to move to the next slide. Also did a short little synopsis, but gave some particular actual stories from on the ground. So she told about a family who, with their 7 kids, was living in their car. She told about another family, I think of 14, that was all living in an apartment together. So that's also a challenge during this time, is to find, you've got your mission, but who are those direct people, families, kids, whatsoever, that you are impacting during this time? Because if you think about donors, I know we've had some different fundraising webinars and some more that are coming up. But if you think about your donors and why people are giving you money, they want to see that impact right now. They want to see that I gave you XYZ amount of dollars, and here's the person I was able to help. I was able to help this family with 7 kids living in their car. Like, I just can't even imagine that. So make sure you're showing, not only telling your story, but you're showing your story. So pictures, videos, just all the different ways. Get creative. If you're thinking, well, I'm not providing direct services to the public, so I don't have a great way to show a picture or video of 500 cars in a line. Well, then, what are your people doing? Can you email them and ask them, hey, can you send me a picture of you read, like if you're providing books for kids, you're reading to your kids at home during this time. Just different ways to still try to connect your story to we are making a direct impact on people during this time.
Leadership Gwinnett was taking pictures of their Zoom meetings today
Yes.
to show what that looked like. So just think outside the box.
Right. If your organization is everybody's on there for a group call, take pictures of that too. I've seen that.
Show your board getting together on Zoom calls, whatever that looks like.
Yes.
To show you're active and supporting and caring.
Yes. Which again goes back to, thank goodness we live in this time with technology, because there are many ways to still stay connected, even though we are remote. And so switching gears just a little bit, but talking again about showing your story. So your story needs to be out, especially on social media, but most of you the routine because you've been doing this, newsletters, your website, so on and so forth. But as you would well imagine, social media is just going crazy right now. I was reading, I think in maybe it was Japan or China or something, but Facebook reported like a 70% increase in their messaging platform and people using Facebook Messenger to do video chats because it's there and it works. And that's what people are doing. What I was interested to see from an ad standpoint is that people are engaging with more organic content than paid, which is a complete reverse from even 3 months ago, where it was paid. So as most of you probably know, if you put out a post on social media, the way the algorithms work, most everybody in your audience is not going to see that unless they're interacting on a super regular basis with your page. So we've had to switch to paid, whether that's boost or creating ads or sponsoring posts on Instagram and so on and so forth. But the silver lining out of the COVID-19 crisis is that organic content is doing better than paid. So if your ad budget has really shrunk or you've never even had one, good news for you. You can do a lot more now than you ever have before. So utilize that with, here's my next slide. So Facebook usage itself, not talking about Messenger platform, has increased by 37%, which is huge. Yes, that is a huge. Yeah. We may think, well, that's not 60 or 70%, but that is a huge jump.
We're looking at 1 billion people. 37% is a pretty big number.
Right. And within the span of 3 weeks now, or so. So, make sure that you're communicating on Facebook, Instagram, make sure again, going back to that plan, what channels work best with the audience that I have, so you can spend your very little time that you have working strategically on there. And then if you do have an ad budget, which we always recommend no matter what anyway, even if it's, a small one, great news is social ads are cheaper than ever. So your cost per clicks are a lot cheaper than they were. If you count all those different markers, impressions, everything across the board, you're getting a lot more bang for your buck. Bang for your buck, not bunk. And I think I pulled this is from Social Bakers. But as you would expect, the pandemic has had an effect on everybody's strategy and performance, social media strategy and performance. There's a lower demand for paid ads on Facebook because people are cutting their budgets, which is in the increased performance of organic content. And like I just mentioned, there's a hidden opportunity for brands / nonprofits who do have some budget to spend and increase their reach right now because of those lower costs. So something to think about if you haven't, have been waiting till you had X amount of dollars, just go ahead and do it now, especially during this time. Absolutely. And part of that show and tell and then thank is just remember, because a lot of us are asking for a lot. Some of us are communicating well too, but you're asking, we need donations, we need money, we need this. So just remember to thank during this time, your messaging. And then again, that goes back to being hopeful and just communicating who you are. But publicly thank people, thank you so much for donating XYZ. This is a difference it has made, or just thank you for following us and being interested in what we're doing. If somebody shares or leaves a comment, thank them for that because they took the time out of their own personal crisis, whatever that may be, to engage with you. So just remember that, just to be personal, appreciative, especially when it comes to donors. Pick up the phone, make a call and just say, hey, I'm not asking for money. I just wanted to check on you and see how you're doing, see if you need anything during this time. You'd be amazed at the difference that something that doesn't cost anything more than your time can make.
And it's also a great thing to be able to delegate too. If you have volunteers who can't come in anymore, give them a call list, or let
Yeah.
them write notes, give them some addresses, or have somebody else be on social replying to your post. So just be smart about that too.
Hmm.
It doesn't have to be from you. If you have to be doing some of that critical strategy, delivery, pivoting, don't let this slip away just because you don't have time. Just make sure that it's still happening no matter what.
Yes, our church actually did this. They divvied up the list of members, and they had the staff call through all of them, from leadership down to executive assistants, and that really makes a difference to people, because you think somebody took the time to call and check on me during this, and just to see if I'm doing okay. So
Absolutely.
make sure you thank people. All right, so what are some next steps during this time? So we've talked about make sure you have a plan, make sure you know your audience. We've talked about being able to tell your story, tell it well, show your story, using video. Thank goodness we have cell phones, because most of them have much higher res cameras than they did back when we had our 2 megapixel cameras. So use that. So what next? So make sure you take a few minutes and think about, okay, what tools and resources do I have right now? Because again, like Amanda and I mentioned earlier, you may be very limited in what you have access to. So take a look at what you've currently got in your toolbox and what you need in order to continue telling your story within the context of current events. There are tons of resources out there. You probably, like us, we're getting inundated with emails about different things, people offering free trials for 30, 60, 90 days, so on and so forth. So see what resources are out there. You might be a great time to try something new. I think almost everybody, not everybody, but I think Zoom could probably speak to that as everybody trying something new. And that may be a great way to test the waters and see, hey, we can use this here on out. It's a great idea. Funny thing about that is Instagram Live, speaking about social media, like more people than ever are using Instagram Live. I saw a funny meme that said it took a pandemic for people to start realizing how useful Instagram Live was. But it's also having a couple glitches now because of that as well. But just think about that. Okay, so I may not have this, but I do have access to this. How can I use it to really get my message out there during this time? And a couple of things I also wanted to include. There's a company called S.M.A.R.T.E.R Marketing for Small Nonprofits. They've got a podcast, they've got a website, and they've got a Facebook group. And she is really focused right now on kind of that guerrilla marketing field of what can we do right in the midst of all this. Building a story brand, which I already mentioned, book, podcast, etc. Causevox.com, which is CAUSEVOX.com, sending out some great information too. And then, guys, I'm sorry you're left out of this, but the majority of women on this, majority of people on this are women anyway. There is a Facebook group called Marketing and Communications Women of Atlanta. It's Marketing and Communications Women of Atlanta. And that's a great resource if you're wanting to toss out some ideas or you need to contact somewhere. I saw somebody posted, I need to get a story out. Does anybody have a news contact? And they had a whole bunch of replies. So think about getting connected in those different ways. And then, like Amanda said, talking about goals and your end in mind, determine what success looks like today. I mean, success today, like as of this very day, may mean you took a picture and you posted it on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, wherever, and said, this is what we did. Thanks for helping. Sometimes it's just as simple as that.
And it's really hard. And we know we're talking to a bunch of leaders right now, and your list, if not doubled, tripled, quadrupled since this has happened. And sometimes you just see all the things that you didn't get to, and you don't take a minute to focus on what you did do. And that's why understanding what success looks like, because your perspective and your energy going into this is just as if not even more critical, because if you're in the right mindset for this, you have to give yourself pep talks, or you need to get somebody else to help give you pep talks and see what's happening and how it's going. So understand and focus on the gains that you're making and not the gaps that you still see. So take some time and celebrate. One of the things our team does is anytime we have a staff meeting, we get together, we start it with what are celebrations since the last time we talked. And I will tell you, when we first started doing this, it was hard. to think about it, but as time has gone on, man, we go through that really fast. And I'm so glad we had that in place, because it really helps set the tone and energy for seeing things optimistically now, because we start with what things are going well. So those are little things that might not feel important, especially when you're looking at all the things you have to do, but that really can shift that culture. And that culture is so critical to not become toxic right now. So I'm just going to throw that in from a leadership perspective, because people are watching you, people are listening to you, and we want to make sure that you are that ray of hope.
Yep. And remember that done is better than perfect, especially
Absolutely.
these days. So just celebrate that you got something done, and not the fact that it was not as perfectly polished as you wanted. So just remember, done is better than perfect.
Absolutely. All right, so we want to take a second and open up for questions. So if you guys want to post any questions you have into the chat, we are happy to answer specific questions. We are here for you. So
Right.
Let us know what you guys want to talk through, anything you're going through. The chat is in the lower bar. It could be the upper bar, depending on how your screen's set up. Actually, I shouldn't say that anymore. So just let us know if you guys have any questions. We're going to hang out here for a couple minutes before we sign off. But yeah, don't hesitate to reach out to either Heather or I. We are here. We are here for you. We have teams that are dealing and looking at this every day in this new version of the world, looking at resources, tapping into new networks of people. Our goal is just to make sure you guys can keep your doors open, keep serving people through all of this.
Yep, that's right. And answer and no question's too small. I mean, if you think, I don't know if I should ask that, just ask it anyway. Because sometimes just talking through it and brainstorming brings up solutions you wouldn't have thought of before.
All right, I had one come in. Oh, here we go. Contact information. Hold on a second.
So we'll skip the dog and the Magoo glasses. That's right.
There we go. Here's our contact information if you want to reach out to either of us. We both have teams in place so please don't be offended if we push you to somebody who is already specifically working in a niche. Just want to give you a heads up on that. We're trying to help everybody as quickly as we can work through that.
Pivot and hustle. It's the mantra.
Absolutely. But I think pivot is actually such a good word, because it's not getting rid of everything. It's not saying that the world is total. It is different. It is different than it was, but it's not in the case. The basics are still there. Good communication is still in place. So those are some critical things to be thinking about. All right. Well, if you guys think of anything else, please don't hesitate to email us. We'll be sending out resources that we mentioned today. We'll also have this recording if you need to go back and listen to any of it, or if you think this would be helpful for anybody else out there who should hear it. So we'll have it up on YouTube probably, hopefully tomorrow. We'll do a couple of edits on it, get that over to you.
And then on the Community Foundation side, don't forget on April 9th, we've got another webinar called Online Fundraising During a Crisis, which should be great. It's Ronald from For a Good Cause. So mark your calendars for that, April 9th, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. And you can find more details on that at cfneg.org. And then you guys, you have anything up, or did you already mention that?
We just did yours yesterday.
Okay, gotcha.
I think I'm up to, we will actually, but if you guys have things that you specifically want and need in the marketing, branding realm, shoot ideas to us, because we want to hear what you guys need. We are going to do an April webinar on the 22nd, and we're leaving that topic TBD, because we want to make sure that it's not something that we thought was a great idea. We want to hear from you guys. So please shoot any ideas to Amanda at 123shoot, and we'll put those in. We're trying to, Community Foundation, Magnolia Media, Rock, Paper, Scissors, we're all trying to get content out to you guys to support you with that, all the ears that we're hearing from. How do we make sure that we're turning that back to you guys as quickly as we can and being relevant?
Yes. You stole my word. I was going to say being relevant.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you guys for coming and joining us today, and we'll send some follow-ups, and we'll see you in a couple weeks, hopefully.
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for taking the time to hang out with us.